If I stop uploading here, you can find me via my website in the description below. Chapter 1. 1487. The Mayfly Race. Yen Yao and Yan Li's faces immediately paled at the sight of the white-haired woman. "Oh, so there's a couple of semi-ghostly beings among the three of you. No wonder you were able to emerge from my restriction." The purple-armored general was somehow able to immediately identify Yuan Yao and Yan Li's constitutions, and he lost interest in them as a result. He then turned his attention toward Han Li, and the latter was immediately struck by a bone-chilling burst of spiritual sense sweeping toward him, attempting to completely see through his entire being. Han Li's brows furrowed as he activated his great development technique to repel most of the armored generals. Spiritual sense. At the same time, he also swept his spiritual sense toward the man. As a result, Han Li's expression changed slightly as he discovered that the body of armored general was extremely cold, and was not a body of flesh and blood, but there was no yin ghost energy within it either. He then swept his spiritual sense toward the other two generals, as well as the crimson armored soldiers behind them, and he discovered that aside from the carriage-drawing beasts, all of them were also completely devoid of life. "These are puppets." Han Li was shocked as he arrived at this verdict. These puppets seemed to have already controlled the ghostly beings of the infernal river. Setting aside the crimson armored soldiers, the three armored generals each had different auras, and they'd most likely been possessed by the souls of extremely powerful beings. Furthermore, the fact that the two demon monarchs hadn't attacked these puppets yet was a clear indication that both sides were evenly matched. Otherwise, such an impasse couldn't be maintained, as the two women would have destroyed their opponents already. Liu Zhu and Di Hue weren't present, so they were presumably still trapped within the ghostly mist, battling the powerful ghost that had unleashed that thunderous roar earlier. "Get over here!" Mu Qing suddenly waved a hand toward Han Li. There was certainly no chance for them to escape in this situation, so Han Li could only do as he told, flying over to the two demon monarchs before cupping his fist in a respectful salute. "I pay my respects to my two seniors. Fellow Taoist Han, why isn't Jin Ling with you? Where is it right now?" Rather than asking about why Han Li and the others had escaped from the ghostly mist, she instead inquired about that golden ape. "I'm not sure. Brother Jin and I were forcibly separated by the ghostly beings in the mist," Han Li replied truthfully. "Is that so?" Mu Qing's brows furrowed upon hearing this. Han Li glanced at the puppets they were facing off against and asked, "Senior Mu, what are these beings? Were they the ones that set up this ghostly mist? Fellow Taoist Han and I have only just recently escaped from this mist as well. We were just about to unleash some techniques to break this restriction, only to be forced into this confrontation by those beings, and we haven't had a chance to ask them anything yet. However, I didn't see these things last time I was in here, so I think they're just like us in that they also came into the infernal river from the outside." Mu Qing was clearly also rather perplexed. Han Li's expression changed slightly upon hearing this. "As you figured out already, we're facing an army of puppets, but there's certainly nothing to be scoffed at. Those three puppet generals are all extremely powerful, and even if fellow Taoist Lan and I were to attack in person, we're still confident in our ability to kill them," Mu Qing said in a grave voice. On the other side, the white-haired woman didn't ask Yuan Yao and Yan Li any questions. Instead, she looked on at the three puppet generals and asked in a cold voice, "I don't care what you are, but answer me this. Are you going to withdraw this restriction or not? Withdraw this restriction. What a joke, you outsiders have infiltrated the holy land of our Mayfly race, and you're trying to get your hands on our holy artifact. You're the ones who attacked us last time as well, right? We let you get away on that occasion, but that won't happen again." The purple-armored general replied in a cold voice, "The Mayfly race." The white-haired beauty's expression changed drastically, while Mu Qing's heart jolted upon hearing this. Meanwhile, Han Li's brows furrowed in befuddlement. He had no recollection of seeing any records about such a race. "You know of our race? Then that makes things easier. If you surrender and hand yourselves over without a fight, we could perhaps spare your lives. Otherwise, even if you manage to get away this time, our race will deploy troops to wipe you off the face of the spirit realm." The purple-armored general was initially slightly taken aback, but a menacing tone then crept into its voice. Mu Qing and the white-haired woman glanced at one another upon hearing this, and their expressions had turned quite grim in the face of the threats made by the purple-armored general. The two of them then began to transmit their voices to one another in a silent conversation. The purple-armored general merely chuckled coldly upon seeing this, but did nothing to stop them. As the voice transmission continued, an indecisive look appeared on the white-haired woman's face, and Mu Qing's brows were also tightly furrowed. It appeared that neither of them could arrive at a decision. You proclaim this to be the holy land of the Mayfly race, and you'll to support these claims. Since when did the Mayfly race switch to cultivating in yin ghost powers? The white-haired woman asked in a cold voice. You don't need to be made aware of that. Do you really think that the infernal river surrounding this space appeared out of thin air? The purple-armored general replied with a cold chuckle. Mu Qing and the white-haired woman's expressions changed slightly upon hearing this, and they seemed to be growing a little more convinced by the armored general's claims. After a brief silence, the white-haired beauty adopted a cold expression and said, "Humph. Who knows if you're truly from the Mayfly race or merely imposters, even if you really are from the Mayfly race. I'd only be wary if a heavenly Mayfly tier being from your race were present. You think a few puppets like you can force us to surrender?" Mu Qing didn't say anything to stop her, and a layer of azure chi had appeared over her body. Red light flashed within the eyes of the purple-armored general upon hearing this, and it wasted no further time with words as it slammed a palm onto the back of its rhinoceros steed. The beast immediately reared its head before inhaling deeply. All of the surrounding air seemed to have been sucked away by the rhinoceros, following which it opened its mouth with a low roar. A ball of azure light then shot forth amid a piercing flash of light, heading straight for the two demon monarchs. A thunderous rumbling nose was erupting from the ball of azure light, and the white-haired woman's expression darkened as she made a hand seal. Grey light flashed behind her, and a massive ghostly projection with a head of disheveled hair appeared, then swelled drastically in size. It opened its massive mouth and blasted forth a ball of black light in retaliation. The two balls of light clashed amid an earth-shattering boom. Azure and black light intertwined, creating a massive mushroom cloud in the aftermath of the explosion. A vicious light appeared in the white-haired woman's eyes upon seeing this, and she let loose a long, shrill cry. The thousands of ghostly soldiers then transformed into gusts of pitch-black yin winds as they swept toward their opponents, led by the 8 ghost monarchs. The opposing purple-armored generally harumphed coldly before drawing the 2 golden war hammers from his back. Even though this is only a puppet body, I should be able to unleash half of my full power. The purple-armored general murmured to himself in an unintelligible voice, then swung his golden war hammers through the air. The war hammers were then released from his grasp and flew into the air before radiating boundless golden light, manifesting over 100 golden war hammer projections that came crashing down soundlessly toward the gusts of yin winds. 8 long cries erupted from amid the yin winds at once, following which the 8 yin armor ghost monarchs appeared at low altitudes. They either hurled their weapons through the air as streaks of black light, or thrust their palms violently into the air a few times, or opened their mouths to expel bursts of black light. In any case, 8 bursts of black light hurtled forth, combining to form a black barrier of light. All of the golden war hammer projections that struck the barrier of light were completely trapped like fish in a net. Nice party trick. The purple-armored general's expression darkened as he let loose a derisive harumph. All of the golden war hammer projections caught within the light barrier then exploded in unison, and the barrier was completely pulverized by the resulting blasts of violent golden light. The golden light then descended onward, trying to engulf all 8 of the ghost monarchs. However, right at this moment, Mu Qing sprang into action. She flipped a hand over before grabbing the air, and a rich, peculiar fragrance suddenly wafted through the air beneath the golden light. Rainbow spiritual light then flashed, following which countless giant flower projections appeared out of thin air. These projections kept the golden light at bay as they clashed amid a resounding boom, and the yin armor profound ghosts down below took advantage of this opportunity to charge toward their enemies. The purple-armored general merely waved a hand in response without saying anything, and a row of crossbow-wielding crimson-armored puppets immediately stepped forward at once, then let loose their arrows in unison. Countless crimson arrows descended into the yin winds like a torrential downpour. Balls of crimson light exploded within the yin winds, and a series of ghostly figures began to plummet from the sky. However, during this split second, the yin winds plunged headfirst into the army of crimson-armored puppets. led by the 8 ghost monarchs. An extremely fierce battle ensued. None of the ghost monarchs nor normal yin armor profound ghosts attacked the 3 puppet generals. Conversely, the 3 puppets paid no heed to the ghostly soldiers either, as their attention was entirely focused on the 2 demon monarchs. As for Han Yuanyao and Yan Li, they were naturally also disregarded. The 2 women were naturally looking back at the 3 puppets with rapt focus. Aside from the purple-armored puppet, the other 2 puppet generals both had rather strange appearances. One of them was around 400 feet tall, with 3 eyes on its head and a massive axe in its hands. It wore a suit of azure armor that was riddled with sharp black spikes, and it was truly a harrowing sight to behold. Meanwhile, the other puppet general was only around 20 feet tall and clad in a suit of crimson armor. However, it had 2 heads and 4 arms, each of which was holding a different weapon in the forms of a saber, a sword, a spear, and a halberd. Both of their steeds consisted of the same type of crimson water buffalo-like beast, and neither of these puppets had uttered a single word up to this point, seemingly content to allow the purple-armored puppet to speak on their behalf. However, the 3 Eyes puppet suddenly spoke for the first time. "There's no need to meet their assault head-on. We just have to stall them for a while. I've already notified the others, and they'll assist those ghostly beings to kill the other intruders. Then come and reinforce us." Chapter 1, 1488 Reunion. The purple-armored puppet and 2-headed puppet both nodded in agreement, making it seem as if the 3-headed puppet was the true leader of the trio. The 3-headed puppet made no effort to lower its voice, so not only did Mu Qing and the white-haired beauty hear it, it was clearly audible even Han Li, Yuan Yao, and Yan Li. Mu Qing adopted a peculiar expression, while a deriding sneer appeared on the white-haired beauty's face. "Sesem, her sister Mu, seeing as they want to wait for some reinforcements, why don't we wait with them?" The white-haired woman chuckled as she turned to Mu Qing. "My thoughts exactly. We'll do as you say, Sister Lan," Mu Qing agreed with a smile. The white-haired woman nodded before withdrawing her hands into her sleeves, and the massive ghostly projection behind her hovered motionlessly in mid-air. Mu Qing also crossed her arms and stood completely still atop her golden flower. The 2 of them really did seem to be planning to wait. Meanwhile, the high-grade demon beast, as well as Han Li and the others, naturally stood still on the spot, having received no orders to attack. Hints of curiosity flashed through the eyes of the 3 puppets upon seeing this, but what the 2 women were doing played right into their hands, so they also merely remained on the spot with cold expressions on their faces. Weapon projections yin winds, and streaks of spiritual light intertwined relentlessly in the air amid relentless strings of explosions. Shattered puppets and ghostly soldiers plummeted from the sky from time to time before disappearing into black mist, amid a string of dull thumps. Meanwhile, the 5-body integration stage powerful beings continued to engage in a tense standoff. The crimson-armored puppets clearly had the advantage in numbers and were more proficient in teamwork. Meanwhile, the yin armor profound ghosts were more powerful individually and with the 8 ghost monarchs among their ranks. They were forcing the crimson-armored puppets back into retreat, seemingly having completely gained the upper hand. Thankfully for the crimson-armored puppets, the armored warriors on the 100 or so war carriages on their side were fighting without any fear of death. And the carriages themselves, along with the beasts, they were drawn by all possessed powerful abilities. Thus, they were able to combine their powers to ward off most of the ghost monarchs. Otherwise, the situation would have most likely been even worse for them. A contemplative look flashed through Han Li's eyes upon seeing this. The normal crimson-armored puppets moved quite slowly and clearly had lackluster reaction speed. These were only ordinary puppets with no spiritual sense imbued within them. In contrast, the yin armor profound ghosts that had been trained by the white-haired beauty were displaying their immense powers, lashing out with yin winds and all types of weapons to vanquish their enemies. And the opposing puppets were often either frozen into black blocks of ice or sliced into countless pieces by the blades of wind. The 8 yin armor demon monarchs were even more dominant. All of them had transformed into massive black-armored ghosts that were over 100 feet tall, with gigantic bull horns on their heads and sets of sinister, menacing facial features. The puppets fought with all their might, only to be easily torn into shreds by these ghost monarchs. However, the 3 puppet generals paid no heed to this, as if the subordinates that were being destroyed were completely inconsequential. Meanwhile, the white-haired beauty and Mu Qing were naturally happy to maintain this standoff, seeing as their ghostly soldiers were annihilating the opposition. After a while, most of the crimson armored puppets had been destroyed, as had all of the war carriages on their side. Conversely, a small portion of the yin and more profound ghosts had disappeared, and the 8 ghost monarchs were also all riddled with wounds. A cold light flashed through the white-haired woman's eyes, and she turned around to glance at the other high-grade demon beasts, seemingly about to issue some kind of instruction. However, right at this moment, a burst of silent fluctuations erupted from deep within the mist, and the air in the area near Han Li and the others began to tremor and quake. This strange occurrence naturally drew everyone's attention. However, they could only tell that the sea of mist in the distance was tumbling and swirling violently, but they were unable to see through the mist and ascertain what was going on in there. Just as Han Li had also narrowed his eyes in bewilderment, a low buzzing sound swept toward them from the extremely far distance. A speck of white light flashed from afar, following which another earth-shattering roar rang out, and a scintillating white sun appeared within the mist. The sun then expanded rapidly, illuminating almost the entire sea of mist with its incandescent light. The white light then receded, yet an unfathomable burst of spiritual pressure began to wreak havoc within the space with reckless abandon. Crap! Everyone had reflexively closed their eyes in the face of that brilliant sun, and as soon as they sensed that burst of fearsome spiritual pressure, all of them turned around and fled the scene without any hesitation, flying away from the mist. Han Li was also among the people fleeing the scene. He flapped his thunderstorm wings and disappeared on the spot as an arc of lightning. Meanwhile, Yuan Yao and Yan Li suddenly gathered together as grey mist surged around their bodies, and they flew away amid gusts of yin winds that they'd conjured up. As for the other high-grade demon beast, all of them were also scattering as quickly as they could. A rumbling thunderclap rang out from the distance, following which a white hurricane erupted into the air at the center of the sea of mist, as if it were a white true dragon rising into the skies. However, the pillar of wind then abruptly shattered in the face of that explosive thunderclap. Howling winds began to sweep forth in all directions, and the winds were so fearsome that they seemed to be threatening to tear this entire space open. Even though a restriction had been placed on this mist in advance, there was no way that it was able to withstand such fierce winds. As such, the sea of mist was completely swept away without being able to offer any resistance. When Han Li reappeared over 10,000 feet away and turned toward back to assess the situation, his heart abruptly jolted with shock. The dense sea of mist that had stretched for as far as the eyes could see now ceased to exist, and countless gusts of furious white winds had taken its place. The place that they'd been situated at before had been completely transformed into a world of howling winds with countless wind blades that were invisible to the naked eye surging through the air. This windstorm was extremely fierce. The puppets and ghostly soldiers that weren't able to get away in time were all swept up into these ferocious winds, and they were struggling with all their might to remain intact. However, the winds were simply too powerful to contend with, and after a series of explosions and howls of anguish, almost all of the puppets and yin armor profound ghosts were instantly eradicated into nothingness. Only the 8 ghost monarchs still remained resisting with all their might as black light flashed over their bodies. But their situation was also very dire. The white-haired beauty's expression darkened upon seeing this. All of a sudden, she let loose a sharp cry, and all 8 ghost monarch immediately let loose shrill cries of their own to resonate with her. They then barely managed to transform into balls of black light before hurtling toward the same spot. Brilliant black light erupted, and the 8 balls of light combined into one. Ripples then ran along the surface of this ball of light, following which it transformed into a gargantuan ghost that was several hundred feet tall. As soon as this ghost took shape, it fled toward a certain direction, escaping the area encompassed by the vicious winds in just a few flashes before, rushing directly toward the white-haired beauty as quickly as they could. At this moment, the 3 puppet generals were appraising the windstorm with contemplative looks in their eyes, seemingly in deep thought about something. All of a sudden, heavy footsteps sounded from deep within the gusts of wind. The ground tremored slightly with each and every step, and each successive step seemed to be heavier and closer than the last one. It was as if a colossal creature was making its way toward everyone, and it was doing so at an alarming speed. Everyone looked on at the windstorm with grave expressions on their faces. Moments later, a mountainous black shadow began to appear from within the gust of wind, and it only seemed to be expanding further as it progressed onward. The ferocious winds didn't have any effect on the black shadow at all, and after a hint of blue light flashed through Han Li's eyes, an expression of enlightenment appeared on his face. A thunderous roar suddenly erupted from within the howling winds, following which the black shadow leapt out of the windstorm, revealing itself to be a purple giant. It was none other than Di Shui's purple blood puppet. At this moment, the two crimson-robed figures were standing on its shoulders while a black-robed man stood atop its head. The black-robed man was none other than the most mysterious being among the four demon monarchs, Liu Zhu. The white-haired beauty was elated to see this, yet before she had a chance to say anything, green light suddenly flashed through the eyes of the three puppets in the distance, and the three-eyes puppet exclaimed, "How did you two come out alive? Where's everyone else?" "Everyone else? You mean these things," Liu Zhu said in an indifferent voice before sweeping a sleeve through the air, and four round objects suddenly tumbled down from above the purple blood puppet's head. Han Li focused his gaze on those objects to find that they were all crimson heads that were wearing strange helmets. "You killed all of them. That's impossible. The four of them are even more powerful than us three, and they had so many ghostly beings to assist them." The purple-armored puppet was completely incredulous as he looked at the heads on the ground. "Hey, if your true bodies were here, 7 golden mayfly tier beings really would pose a stern challenge even for me. However, you're all merely puppets, and you'd be lucky to be able to unleash even half of your power in your current state. So of course you're no match for me. Fellow Taoist Mu, fellow Taoist Lan, kill them all." Liu Zhu instructed with a sinister chuckle, and astonishing killing intent erupted from his body. The three puppets were all horrified to hear this, and one of them yelled, "Split up and run." The three puppets then urged their steeds into action in unison, instantly transforming into 3 streaks of light of different colors that fled toward different directions. Following just a few flashes, they were already several thousand feet away. All of their steeds possessed strange movement techniques that were extremely fast. However, Liu Zhu and the others seemed to have a tacit understanding between them. The white-haired beauty let loose an unsettling chuckle before hurtling toward the purple-armored puppet as a plume of azure smoke, followed closely by the body integration stage gargantuan ghost, which flew through the air as a ball of black light. Muking stomped a foot onto her golden flower, and a black formation of light appeared out of thin air, following which both she and her flower disappeared. In the next instant, she reappeared far closer to the twin-headed puppet than she was a moment ago. One of the crimson-robed figures let loose a long roar, and the purple blood puppet strode forward as purple and red flames erupted all over its body, covering a distance of over 1,000 feet, with just a single stride pursuing the three-eyes puppet. Thus, all of the body integration stage beings disappeared in the blink of an eye, leaving behind only Han Li, Yuan Yao, Yan Li, and a dozen or so high-grade demon beasts. Right at this moment, Yan Li transmitted her voice to him. "Take this opportunity to get away, fellow Taoist Han. These demon beasts won't be able to stop you." Chapter 1, 1489 Insect Projection. Han Li remained completely expressionless upon hearing this, but he really was tempted to make a move. However, he then cast his gaze toward a certain direction, and what he saw there immediately made his heart sink. "Ha, you really are an extraordinary man, fellow Taoist Han. As expected, my concealment abilities weren't enough to fool you." A burst of hearty laughter suddenly erupted from empty space, following which golden light flashed and a golden figure appeared. It was none other than the golden ape Jin Ling. Even though the ape was chortling in a raucous manner, it wore an extremely cold expression as it looked at Han Li. Yuan Yao and Yan Li's expressions changed in unison upon seeing this. They had spent many years in the Earth Abyss, so they were naturally well aware of just how powerful this golden ape was. The two of them were extremely confident in Han Li's abilities, but they knew that there was no way he'd be able to directly oppose a being at the pinnacle of the spatial tempering stage. With this ape present along with all of the other high-grade demon beasts, it would be impossible for him to get away. "I'm glad you're safe, Brother Jin. After we were separated in that ghostly mist, I was worried about you for a long while, but it appears my concerns were unnecessary. With your immense cultivation base, those ghostly beings never stood a chance," Han Li said in a calm voice. I do have some self-preservation skills, but I can't compare with you, fellow Taoist Han. You were able to emerge from the mist as a spirit general. That's very much worthy of my admiration. Jin Ling praised with a smile on its face. I don't have such abilities. It was all thanks to fellow Taoist Yuan and fellow Taoist Yan that I was able to escape from this mist. Han Li replied with a shake of his head. Those two may have certain methods to find their way out of this mist, but without Brother Han's assistance, they wouldn't have been able to deal with the powerful ghostly beings along the way. Jin Ling continued. Han Li merely smiled in response and didn't say anything further. However, his mind was quickly scrambling. He was confident that his powers were not inferior to Jin Ling's, and even weighing those high-grade demon beasts into the equation, he was still confident that he had a 70% to 80% chance of getting away. However, that was only if he were to escape on his own. If he were to take Yuan Yao and Yan Li with him, then that probability fell to less than 50%. This was not a worthwhile risk for him to take. In any case, this infernal river was an extremely perilous and unpredictable place, so it was best to find another opportunity in the future. Thus Han Li made his decision and began to chat with Jin Ling. Seeing as Han Li seemed to have no intention of getting away, the golden ape also relaxed a little, and the two of them engaged in a pleasant conversation as if they'd been good friends for many years. Just as they were conversing with one another, a ball of green light suddenly sped back toward them from afar. Mu King was standing atop her golden flower as she flew soundlessly through the air, and Han Li faltered initially upon seeing this, a little surprised that she was back so soon. But he then recalled back to the teleportation-like movement techniques that she'd unleashed in the past, and he was quickly enlightened. Following a few flashes, the ball of green light appeared overhead before fading to reveal Mu Qing's slender figure. I pay my respects to my mistress. The golden ape immediately extended a respectful bow. I'm glad you're safe, Jin Ling. An elated look appeared on Mu Qing's face at the sight of the golden ape. It was all thanks to the protective treasures you bestowed upon me, mistress. Otherwise, there was no way that I could have managed to remain unscathed in the face of so many ghostly beings. In the end, I was only able to escape with assistance from Master Liu Zhu and Master Di Shui, the golden ape replied. That windstorm in the end was clearly fellow Taoist Liu Zhu's handiwork. This is the first time I've seen him unleash a wind attribute ability, Mu Qing said in a slow voice, and there was a hint of unidentifiable emotion in her tone. Master Liu Zhu's powers are indeed quite unfathomable, but it was exactly because of this that those puppets and ghostly beings were vanquished so easily. Jin Ling said in a slightly grim voice. You're right. In a perilous place like this, the more powerful fellow Taoist Liu Zhu is the better. Seeing as I've already taken care of my opponent, the others most likely won't take too much longer either. Mu Qing nodded after a brief silence before casting her gaze into the distance. Coincidentally, in the instant that she raised her head, a speck of spiritual light flashed in the extremely far distance in the direction that she'd cast her gaze toward, following which a ball of black chi appeared and hurtled toward them. Moments later, the ball of black chi appeared before everyone like a shooting star before receding to reveal the white-haired beauty. The woman appeared to be completely unscathed, but her aura was slightly more feeble than when she'd set off, indicating that she'd expended quite a bit of magic power. She looked around before her brows furrowed as she asked, why aren't Liu Zhu and Di Jue back yet with their abilities? I would have thought that they'd be the first ones to take care of their opponent. I'm not sure of that myself. Perhaps they encountered some mishaps along the way. Where are your 8 ghost monarchs? Sister Lan, didn't they go with you to hunt down that puppet? Mu Qing asked with a curious expression. The puppet self-detonated on the brink of death, and the 8 ghost monarchs were all severely damaged as a result. So I've stored them away into my yin cloud pouch for recovery. I really getting rather worried about Liu Zhu and Di Shui though. If you and I are the only ones remaining, there'd be no chance for us to secure the divine infernal river elixir. A concerned look appeared on the white-haired beauty's face. Mu Qing was just about to say something in response when a resounding boom suddenly erupted from a certain direction. That direction was none other than the one that Liu Zhu and Di Shui had departed toward earlier. Mu Qing and the white-haired beauty exchanged a glance upon hearing this earth-shattering commotion, and both of them could see their own surprise mirrored on one another's faces. Could it be? The white-haired beauty's brows furrowed with concern, However, before she had a chance to finish her sentence, a sharp screech suddenly rang out from the direction where the explosion had just taken place. As soon as Han Li heard this unbearable sound, his vision blacked out and plummeted from the sky. Crap! Han Li almost immediately reacted by sealing off his sense of hearing, then activating his great development technique. However, what was quite astonishing to him was that this sharp screech completely disregarded his attempt to seal off his hearing, piercing directly into his spiritual sense anyway. The great development technique was indeed quite useful in such situations, but its activation had been cut off halfway by that sharp screech, so its effects were naturally severely hampered. Han Li's heart jolted with shock as he let loose a loud roar, unleashing the spirit-stunned thorn on himself to send a burst of searing pain piercing into his spiritual sense. As such, he was temporarily able to recover his clarity of mind and regain control over his own body. He then unleashed a layer of golden lightning around his body amid a loud thunderclap, then abruptly slammed his black and white palms together in front of his chest. 5 colored flames and grey light immediately erupted from his hands in unison, then intertwined with one another to form a dual-layered barrier of light that encapsulated his body. With these defensive measures in place, the effect that the sharp screech had on his spiritual sense was severely dampened, and he managed to right himself in mid-air again. However, he then caught sight of Yuan Yao and Yan Li, both of whom were still rapidly plummeting out of the sky, and they were going to crash heavily onto the jagged rocks down below very soon. Thus he immediately made a grabbing motion toward them, upon which countless grey threads shot forth from within the grey light, instantly latching onto the 2 women before drawing them toward him. Han Li then expanded the flames and grey light emanating from his body to encompass the 2 of them as well, and a hint of colour returned to their cheeks as they regained the ability to hover in mid-air again. At this moment, a string of dull thumps rang out from down below as the dozen or so high-grade demon beasts fell heavily to the ground. Having been unable to withstand the effects of the sharp screech, all of the demon beasts possessed robust bodies, so falling from this height wasn't an issue at all for them. However, all of them had their hands pressed over their ears with all their might while they thrashed and rolled around in agony. All types of protective spiritual lights flashed erratically around bodies, but they seemed to be completely ineffective. Han Li drew a sharp breath upon seeing this before casting his gaze toward the others. Jin Ling was situated beside Mu Qing, and the golden flower down below had conjured up a series of flower projections to shield them from the effects of the sharp screech. As for the white-haired beauty, she was enshrouded in a ball of yin winds and stood in a completely motionless manner, clearly also unaffected by the sharp screech. However, all 3 of them were looking on into the distance with intense, unblinking eyes as the screech was only growing louder, and an incredible phenomenon had appeared up ahead. A massive crimson insect projection had emerged up ahead, and it was so massive that it took up virtually the entire sky. It had a pair of inky black compound eyes that shimmered with a cold light, while a pair of semi-transparent wings flapped on either side of its body like a pair of light barriers. It appeared to be a fly that had been enlarged countless times. The debilitating screeching sound that had almost felled Han Li was coming from none other than the wings of that insect projection. As the projection rapidly flapped its wings, fluctuations that were visible to the naked eye were proliferating from them. They then seemed to have disappeared as they surged further through the air, but in reality, they had turned into that sharp, screeching sound that was clearly audible even from Han Li's location. Even from so far away, the sharp screech possessed such fearsome might. If they were situated right before the insect projection, there'd be no need for it to do anything other than flapping its wings to kill its enemies. However, this fly-like projection wasn't only flapping its wings, it was also blasting countless thick pillars of crimson light out of its compound eyes. These pillars of light rained down from above, virtually encompassing the entire space down below. Even though Han Li couldn't truly experience the might of these pillars of light for himself, they were still a formidable sight to behold even from afar. Beneath the massive net constructed from these intertwining pillars of light, there were 2 beings evading these pillars of light with all their might. These 2 beings were each around 100 feet in size, but they were so tiny and insignificant compared to the gargantuan insect projection that they weren't immediately noticed. Blue light flashed within Han Li's eyes, and he immediately identified these 2 beings. One of them was the purple blood puppet which had shrunk down drastically, while the other being came as a massive shock to Han Li.